righty. Well, we are live, and looks like people are logged on, which is great. Always a good thing to see. We want to welcome you all to the Neutral Zone Unmasked. We're going to have a very special guest for you tonight. Actually, she and I first met in 2018. And she produced a video of her adventures at what was then Stage 9 Studios. But she's got a lot going on. Hard to believe she's still awake. But we want to welcome Red Romina.
Hello, is that my cue?
That is your cue. That is your cue. Welcome. Appreciate you being here with us.
No, thank you for having me.
So a lot of questions to ask. There's a lot of diversity in what you do. Obviously you've been doing this for a long time. My first question is, how did you come up with the moniker Red Romina?
Funny story about that. It's got nothing to do with red shirts. It just so happens that it is my favorite color, and I was also using it as my gamer tag at the time. And so I had a very boring username that was very professional, you know, something that you would use on LinkedIn. And that just wasn't cutting it for the type of content that I was making. So I decided to just compromise and just make it all Red Romina, and that's just who I have become, I guess.
Certainly how you're known, and I think a lot of people do know you now. You've been out on social media for a long time. You're a world traveler. We're going to talk about those things as well. Maybe you could let us know a little bit of your background. You don't have to get too crazy, but how did you start moving into, I want to say social media, but at the time it may not have been social media. But how did you get involved in promotion?
I guess it all kind of, well, I've always been interested in film ever since I was very young. It's just always been a part of me. I've always been creative, and I like creating things. So whether it's, you know, little products or art or a little short film or a commercial, I was always making stuff as a child. And so I guess eventually that just evolved with technology and the trends and just what everybody else was doing. You know, I was in mainstream media, and then YouTube became a thing and social media became a thing. And suddenly there was a platform for me to post all of the stuff that I was creating. And in doing so, I was already traveling. And so I thought, well, maybe I should post, I should combine these two things together, right? The traveling, the stuff I'm already traveling, but I'm not documenting it. And then, but I know how to document it. So why am I not doing it? So that's where Red Romina really came from. And I think that it also came from a love of places that I felt like people didn't know enough about. And first of all, it was to encourage people to travel and to get to know these places and cultures and people. And secondly, to bring the world to people who couldn't necessarily travel. And so in doing so, I got to do a lot of cool things and experience stuff that I never would have imagined that I would have, just because I was helping small businesses or, you know, attractions just to show people that they existed. Guys, you know, video is not the same as photo. And so that was something that was on demand, right? Because it's like anybody could snap a photo of stuff very easily with their cell phone and post it to their Instagram. But to go through the trouble of making a full-on video for a place, in my own personal perspective, documenting my experience there is I think it's a special thing, and it's something that it helps other people understand why it is important, why this place is so special.
That's very cool. That's also really great of you to sort of put yourself out there and allow other people to experience what you're experiencing. Do people write you at all uh, to sort of give you, I don't know what, their perspective or to tell you how much they enjoyed, watching your work?
All of the time, all of the time, every day I get messages, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, comment on a video that I made forever ago. I get stuff like that all of the time. I actually get emails as well. People go out of their way to send me emails, which is very surprising. I mean, I'm very accessible. Like I have a contact form on my website, so it's like anybody could email me. And but to go through that trouble of going onto my website, finding out what my email is so that they can send me more than 140 characters is that's special, especially when they say something so nice like, I went to this place, I went all the way to this place somewhere else where I'm not from, just because I saw a video that you did or a post that you did. And that is, I mean, aside from the implications of the influence that that has on people, it's also nice to know that the effort that I put in actually has a cause and effect.
That's great. It's great to at least get feedback. Uh, I always think about, and not to make light of it, but Sheldon Cooper in Fun with Flags.
Mm-hmm.
This is such the opposite side of that, where
Right.
you have a following, and people find you, and even people who haven't followed you find you, and let you know what kind of a reaction they've had to something you've posted, and I think that's great.
Right. I think also you know, it's not really so much, you don't have to have a very large following. I think the quality of the content and the information that you're putting out there is what ignites this kind of response in people. Because I had this kind of reaction even when I had just started. Like maybe my second video, I was already getting responses like that. And I believe that it's because of the content. And that's not just like me tooting my own horn and saying that I'm some kind of like Spielberg or anything like that. I'm just saying like I was providing something that was valuable to people and that people wanted to see.
Yeah, more than a service, it's a life. It's life. Here's my
Mm-hmm.
life, and if you like it, maybe you could be a part of it, and I think
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah, and I think too is that part of it as well as kind of bringing people into your life and who you are. Because even though I am pretty private with what I share in my videos and even online, I'm very careful about that. The idea of sharing who I am and what I'm passionate about with the potential billions of people, right? Because it's not just the 3 or 4 people that maybe actually do watch you from your Facebook friends. It's like it's the potential is there for billions of people to see you from one day to the next, because you don't know if it'll happen, right? Maybe 3 people will see it, maybe 3 billion people will see it. And that is very it's kind of like a humbling experience, I guess, because you have to be very vulnerable while you're being careful, because you also don't want to come off as like a robot who doesn't have any interests. But you are consciously choosing to share who you are with strangers,
Yeah,
with the world.
yeah, yeah, and it can be, especially today, it can be a very scary experience. I mean, I see it in responses we get to videos we play, and I'm not going to quote any, but sometimes you wonder, to quote Buzz Lightyear, you are a sad, strange little man. But you don't respond to those people because that's what they're looking for. But yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I get that a lot as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with I get the positive comments, and then I get the, I don't want to say negative, but the, did you think twice before you typed out this entire sentence? Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I try not to judge too much, and I figure sometimes people just don't think.
Well, I've got a question, Romina.
Mm.
I'm a daily journalist. Where did you start out? What's that media background you've got?
Well, I guess the first time I held the camera was when I was a child. That was, I guess, whenever I could hold the camera, right? Because my mom just never allowed me to hold the camera. But my dad, on the other hand, if he could sneak the camera into my hands, somehow always found a way. But I guess I always had a love for film, and so whenever I could document something, I did. And even before there was YouTube, I had a little camera that it was for photos, but it had the capability of shooting 10 seconds of video. It was very rudimentary, and the quality of it, I think maybe it was like 480p. It was just like, it was the very first of its kinds. People weren't, you either had like a huge camcorder or like that's it. This was pre-smartphones and all that stuff. And when I had that camera, I actually used to take it with me everywhere I went. So not only was I taking thousands of photos of whatever I was doing, like when I was hanging out with friends, or if I was at the library with other students, like I was a disturbance. So I was filming. I have tons of clips of just random stuff throughout my adolescence and early adulthood when I had that camera, and I have all these little clips. And so that's really where I started, and that is where I guess vlogging came from. And the idea, I never really considered myself a vlog or anything like that. That didn't come into the dictionary until, I think maybe a decade, maybe 15 years after I had been doing this already. And so as far as like my background, I mean, I studied screenwriting at UCLA. And then I also did film for a little while. I've had a production company for over a decade now. And so I mainly produced. And so I've produced feature films, short films, web series, documentaries, stuff like this. So mainly my focus has been narrative fiction. But as far as like actual documenting reality, it's just been what I've done in my own channels and kind of doing it by brute force, right? Just kind of getting out there with the camera and figuring out after the fact, oh, that was horrendous. I don't know why I did that, but you have to live with it because you've already shot it. And especially when you're doing it with travel, I feel like you have to learn even quicker, because let's say if you're doing something that's local and it's not tied to any specific event, that museum's always going to be there, right? So if you're going to document a museum and like the history of the museum or something like that, that thing is always going to be there. So it's a controlled environment for the most part. But when you're traveling, like if you're in another country or another state, there's so much unpredictability that you have to quickly adapt while you are recording. So anything can happen, like, the weather changes, or your plans get canceled, or you got pickpocketed. Like there's just so much that can happen at any given moment. So you really have to learn very quick when you're doing stuff on the field, as far as like travel's concerned, I feel like.
Well, let's stay with travel for a second, because there was something that you passed along to us that caught my attention. And obviously, you've done a lot of travel. I've looked at some of the images and some of the videos on your website. But you mentioned that you have worked with cheetahs in Africa. That's not something everybody does every day. What was that all about?
Yeah, so that's actually when I first started. When I first started my channel, I was looking for things to do, and that was one of the first things. That was one of my first free trips. So I actually got invited to do this, where I got to live on a cheetah farm for a couple of weeks, and it was a life-changing experience that I can't really describe. First of all, because I mean, I love wildlife, I love animals, but cheetahs weren't really like on my top five. Like, I'm just like, whales, yeah, you know, like, but cheetahs, like, I just never really thought. I thought they were cool, but like, and I knew they ran really fast, but that was like the extent of my knowledge of cheetahs. And so to me, like going there, first of all, was completely out of my comfort zone because I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like I'm here in Africa, like this country that, well, South Africa. I had never been to South Africa before, let alone having to work with wildlife and like game reserves. And I had to learn like all this like lingo real quick. I mean, like they just like throw stuff at you, and so I had to just learn what it was to be in South Africa. And then learning about the cheetahs was so special because I got to really deep dive into this species that I knew nothing about. And I fell in love instantly. It's just so fascinating. It's one thing to see animals in a documentary, and on film, it's another to be within inches of it, and especially one that could kill you. um, so I mean, it's very humbling, and it's definitely something that I will never forget, ever. Um, and as far as like the day-to-day stuff, what that looked like is there was a lot of driving around the ranch. So this particular farm, they breed cheetahs so that they can preserve the species. And so this woman in Ann Van Dyke, she figured out a way for the cheetahs to reproduce in captivity, which is something that's very rare. It's very difficult for that to happen. And so the way that she does it, the process, it allows for the cheetahs to be very successful in reproducing in captivity. So she's helped immensely towards the preservation of their species. And so I got to learn a lot about that. And not only that, but they also have other animals like African wild dogs, which are insanely dangerous. I don't even know which one I'm more afraid of. But it was very cool. Like I got to prepare food for the animals. I got to feed the animals, clean their enclosures, and do other stuff around, like farm maintenance, just stuff that you have to do around any kind of farm that you're on, except you're dealing with a different kind of animal. Instead of like sheep and horses, it's cheetahs and hippopotamus and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a very, very cool experience.
That's interesting. How long ago was that? Because it sounds like that was early on for
Yeah,
you,
so that
right?
was actually a few years ago. I'm gonna say maybe 2016, 20, no, maybe 2015.
Okay, not
I think,
terrible. 5 years, that's
yeah,
not terrible.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe. It's been a few years, yeah. But
Okay,
it was one of the first things, it was one of the first big trips and experiences that I was invited to do.
cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Is there any other, are there any other places that have made maybe not as much of an impression? Because it sounds like that one,
Mm.
made a tremendous impression on you. But are there places that you're so happy that you went to visit?
Um, well, I would have to say the Neutral Zone Studios.
Nice segue there. Nice segue.
Oh,
Yes,
I am the queen of segues.
I wasn't looking for a plug, but thank you. And for anybody who doesn't know, and I mentioned at the very beginning, for anybody who wasn't here, Romina came out to visit the neutral zone back in 2018 and did a video of her adventures at the set. It's on her webpage, which is redromina.com. And it is very cool. It was very complimentary. In fact, Dan and I were talking a little bit before you came in, and he said, "Wow, that set looks really good." So, well, I thank you for that. But that was the beginning of my introduction to Romina, and I've followed her. I've followed her since. Back when we were Stage 9 Studios, for those of you who remember. So I appreciate that. But is there any place outside of the country, or maybe
Outside of the
inside?
neutral zone?
Yes, outside of the neutral zone.
Yeah, actually, and it also involved animals. But I got to swim with whale sharks in down in Mexico, and that was another life-changing experience. It's one that I kind of I still dream about, I guess, in a way. It's just one of those things that just kind of stuck with me because it was my first time swimming with these animals. And first of all, you have to be a pretty strong swimmer in order to stay with the animal. And the reward of being able to do that is really impactful. To be able to just kind of be swimming and you're like in the water, and then you look down and there's just one of the biggest animals that we have, and it's just there, you know? It's just like swimming under you, living, breathing, and just being, right? And that image is just kind of burnt in my brain forever. And it's a beautiful thing. And I would say that's probably been another one of those experiences that I would consider as life-changing, just because of the impact, you know, the footprint that it's left.
Nice. Good to have memories that are good memories.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I'm very fortunate because I feel like I've had more positive experiences while traveling than negative ones. I've definitely had my fair share of negative experiences, but I have been asked, like, you know, multiple times, oh, what's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you abroad? You know, like I get those kinds of questions, and I never really know what to answer because, I mean, you know, I've had stuff where it's just like just regular stuff where it's like, oh, like I've had roaches in my bed, or, you know, stuff that's like, you're like, oh, this is like horrible, but it's like, in like retrospect, it isn't really like so life-changing. You know, fortunately, nothing has ever happened to me. And it hasn't been anything that, it's just something that all of the bad things that have happened to me are things that I expect when going to new territory. So it isn't really like, you know, really bad. But it is kind of, it's funny that that's just something that people really want to know. They just want to know about the horrors, the horrors of travel. But there's really more positive experiences, even when something, you know, bad happens. There's always something good afterwards, or you just realize how ridiculous or how meaningless it is in retrospect, because the rest of the trip is so great that it's like, oh, whatever.
I get it.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of travel because I do have horror stories that I remember. I'm not going to give you any of them, but I always seem to find the worst place to go at the wrong time. So I get it. And I was not going to ask you what your worst experience was.
Hey, it happens.
It happens.
There's yin and yang. You get the bad experiences, I'll get the good ones.
All
We'll
right,
make
that's
it
a
work.
deal. That's a deal. That's why I don't really go more than 10 miles away from my home. Uh, um, so I know that you've said you have a lot of different hobbies. There's a lot of projects you're working on. Is there anything that you would like to talk about?
Well, I guess you know, people ask me what I'm working on all the time, and there's never really an easy answer, and I feel so ridiculous for for being the way that I am. But like I said early on, I love creating and I love making things, whether it's products or actual, works of art, and and now I am also a business lover. I'm very much like, my best subject in school was math, and I love crunching numbers and just figuring how things work and why things work. And business is just a very real life application of it. It's just a way of uh, kind of navigating through all of that. And one of the things that I'm working on now is I've actually started. I have a creative community, which I sort of told you about, Ray, which is the Create IRL, and it's I actually have a little mug here. It's a little. We have our own product, and Create IRL is a members only club for creatives. And so the idea behind that is to bring creatives together to create, to network and collaborate and create in real life. So Create IRL is in real life. And so the idea behind that is just that creating can be so isolating. When you're an artist, you're just kind of making stuff on your own. And so it's easy to just get sucked into that. And I'm very much a team player, and I love bringing people together, and I don't always know what's going to be a good fit. And Create IRL is a way to make that happen. It's a way to just bring people together and let them figure it out.
And that's actually a really great idea. I visited the website Create IRL. I think it's just createirl.com,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. And it's really fascinating. There were two observations I had. One, it was really fascinating. And I certainly, and I think you probably know from some past conversations, that I'm looking to have some either creative relationship with someone to help in studio advertising and promotion. So you may find me as a member.
Yeah.
Just don't block me. Um, but the other thing that I found fascinating, and I've read a lot of your stuff in the past, but I was reading your overview and a couple of different pages, and you have what I think is a very, I can't say it's a unique style, but not everyone has the style that you have, which is basically talking as a person.
Mm,
That, if you say something that's supposed to be funny, that it's supposed to be funny, as opposed
mm.
to somebody saying, what does she mean by that? But that's an observation I had. But I think the concept is great, um, especially that you kind of sounds like you walk away and say, "Okay, you guys fight it out," which is fine, which is probably not the way it is, but
Yeah.
you but yeah, I found it very fascinating, and I would actually, a lot of the people that are associated with the studio are creative people,
Right.
and I think that it deserves the look. And like I said, I think I'm going to be a member.
Yeah, I love that there's so many different ways of being creative. And within the group alone, we have voiceover actors, we have streamers, we have YouTubers, we have filmmakers, photographers, audio engineers. So we have such a diverse group of creative individuals. And I love the idea of bringing people from different industries together so that it's not just the filmmakers who are hanging out, but it's the director who's meeting the dancer. And it's like, okay, what do we, how can we do something together? Because I like you, we have the same interests. How do we create something together? And because of that, something is born, something blossoms from that, because it's something that is unexpected. And that's really something that I try to foster within the collective. And this is something that I started by myself last year because I needed that. I needed the community because I was by myself. And so I started off by doing events in real life. And we eventually got to the point where we were having events every single month. And then the virtual stuff kind of started happening this year. The coincidences, it did not happen post-COVID. It actually happened kind of side by side. It was not a result of COVID that we went virtual. It was meant to be something else. It was supposed to be added on aside from the in-person events. And so it just so happened that then suddenly there were more virtual events, and people were getting used to the idea. So now we actually have virtual events every single month. And we just did our first interview where we bring in professionals, people who are doing this full time, who are creatives, and bringing them in so that we can interview them just for the members, and they can get access to this live and be a part of this very tight-knit community of creatives who are all learning from each other. And I'm very fortunate because I just paired up with a business partner who is helping me with a lot of this stuff. So I definitely am not going to take credit for any of the graphics that you see on the website and all that stuff. That's totally him. And I'm so grateful because it's such a huge undertaking. Because I do say, like, yeah, I'm just going to let them kind of run amok, but the actual infrastructure of it is very time consuming, and it is a lot, because you are dealing with a lot of diverse, not just artists, but people. And so it can get pretty complicated trying to figure out the logistics and make everything work smoothly so that the members, all they have to do is show up. And that's really the beauty of it is, I mean, we just had one of our virtual hangouts today, just a couple hours ago. And it's really nice to see just very different people hanging out and talking and asking each other's questions and giving each other advice. Like, we've never met before, but I'm going to tell you what I know. And I mean, we've had one of our virtual hangouts actually lasted for like 6 hours. This was like maybe 3 months ago. It went on for 6 hours, and we had a talent show, which was not planned. Someone just pulled out their keyboard, someone pulled out their guitar, someone pulled out like a clarinet type thing, and like it just happened, right? All of this just kind of happened live, unexpected, and it was very nice to see. But that's really what the community is about, is just, hey, we're here, we want to create, and we're just going to do it. And it doesn't matter how it comes out. The point is that we're doing it.
That's terrific. That's terrific. And again, it's you have a unique perspective, I think, on things. And maybe it's not unique, but there are so many, people who do things about themselves. But it seems like what you do is for the masses,
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very honorable place to be.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, there's a balance. I do a lot for myself.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. I said to you earlier, I don't know how you ever find time to sleep.
I do get my 8 hours every night.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
All right, you're gonna have to give me your secret because I can't. I can't. Um, so I want to ask because I know you said you've done filmmaking. Do you still do filmmaking, or you're now into other things?
Yeah, I still am. I'm very much into it. I'm actually working right now with a couple. If you see me looking this way, it's because I'm actually looking at the live stream, like our live stream, and I'm looking
Yep.
at the chat. So yeah, I'm getting more and more into documentaries, and I already made my first documentary. It was a short documentary, 5 minutes, and I made that about my father. He's an artist, painter, and so I made a documentary about him. And I have a couple other documentaries that I actually am working on, kind of in the works, but it's kind of like to do a documentary, you have to really be passionate about it, because it does take a lot of time and a lot of research to do it right. And that's not even from the creative standpoint. That's just from the, hey, like, I want to make sure that I have the correct information, the right angle, the right perspective to tell the story and give it the justice that it deserves. And so all of that kind of takes time, but I am excited about a couple of them. So, but I don't want to talk about them yet in detail because they're very preliminary stages of it all. But yeah, absolutely. And I write, and I have my, it's not filmmaking, but I am working on a nonfiction book right now. And that's something that I do on and off as well. By on and off, I mean like every other week. So it's just kind of like a thing that I do when I'm able to make the time for it. But yeah.
Well, I can see a big difference between you and I right away. You have a lot of patience, and I have none.
I've had to learn. I think I definitely got that from my grandfather on my mother's side. My mom says that to me because it's something that always frustrated her about her dad. Because she's very she's very patient about things, and her father was very like relaxed and just chill about everything, and it just like drove her nuts. It drove her insane. And so now I'm driving her insane. Cycle continues.
Sounds like your mom is like my wife, but that's a whole other story. And I don't want to talk about that either. Um, sorry. Um, so from some of the other things I've seen, it looks like you're a big, not just Star Trek, but a big sci-fi fan.
Yeah.
So what are your, I mean, aside from let's put Star Trek to the side for a second.
Yeah.
What do you watch? What do you like? What are your interests?
Oh boy. All right. Well, I guess I'll start off by saying that I do love sci-fi. I mean, I consume I consume a lot of fiction, but I would say the majority of it, like 85%, is probably science fiction. And that goes for novels as well. I read a lot, like constantly. I'm always reading books. And I guess as far as like, I mean, what I watch too is I've been watching a lot of documentaries as well. So between that, it's like documentaries, sci-fi. I do love scary stuff. So I like thrillers. If it's got paranormal stuff in it, like I'm there. If it's got like something that's so weird and unreal, I'm there. Stuff like Hereditary, like that's just like, I just love all that kind of stuff. And but as far as like sci-fi stuff, if it's super hard sci-fi, I mean, my favorite, I love Isaac Asimov just because of his kind of the details that he has. He really goes into the science of it sometimes, where it just feels real. You know, it's not, it doesn't feel like it's like I'm reading a work of fiction. And I guess, I mean, at this point, a lot of the stuff that he has written is real now.
It's true.
So going back and actually reading his robot series, which I do like to do. I actually just reread Caves of Steel a few months ago, and that's probably one of my favorite ones because it mixes this film noir kind of vibe with Elijah Bailey being this detective who talks like he's from the 40s. It's just like, it's so bizarre to see that in conjunction with the super advanced like super in the future society where there's just robots everywhere, but people already hate robots because it's like it's like this society like after TV was introduced and was in everybody's home, you know, where it's just like, we hate TVs, but like it's there, and like we know that we can have a TV, but we don't want it, you know. And it's the environment in it is so much fun. But going back and like reading all of the rereading the robot series now and just seeing what stuff he's, love it. Yes.
Well, you know, Isaac Asimov was a scientist. In fact, many of the sci-fi writers of that period were scientists. And it's funny you mention Asimov because the pulp magazine that has now got his name on it has a story this month that actually relates to the neutral zone and the Far in the Future, written by a friend of ours up in Georgia. So Jack McDevitt. So it's interesting. And I did actually have the chance as a journalist in my younger days to interview Asimov. And fun guy, never traveled by plane, hated to fly anywhere, would only travel on the ground. So that was not the futurist that I thought he was, but he certainly was an interesting character, and I underline character.
Yeah. Well, that kind of plays around, that kind of plays into his writing as well, because in his kind of future society, everybody's a little agoraphobic and everybody just kind of stays indoors. Nobody goes outside. And that's really a testament of like who he was as a person. And it really shows, especially when you go into the planet, was it Solaris, where everybody's got their own thousands of acres of land and everybody's got their own thousands of robots, and it's everybody just, there's just one person living in each property. It really shows who he was as a person, like very kind of isolating. But that's really cool that you got to do that. I can only imagine what it would be like to meet someone like that, because I mean, even though he was a scientist, there's so much creativity that goes into creating a world, a universe, really. This is more than a world, universe like that. To really let your imagination go wild and think about all of the possibilities and put it down on paper for other people to read and be a part of.
And you know, we lost another giant of sci-fi this week, Ben Bova, who was a very voluminous author as well as an editor of Analog Magazine for a number of years, I believe, is gone as well. So the giants that I read when I was your age are now pretty much gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little strange. Time marches on. And,
yeah. But they live on in the work.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's interesting because they really do.
Yeah.
And we remember them. Sometimes they tend to become more of, I don't know what the right word is, but people consider them greater than they perhaps really were. I think they get an aura or something around them. I actually also had a chance to meet Isaac Asimov back in 1972. I was a kid and I was at a Star Trek convention and I was in an elevator and he walked in and he was just so funny and personable. I mean, it was just wonderful. But to be that close to someone who, and admire is a little crazy sometimes.
Right. And who also, in a way, really defined what it is, what robotics is today. So much of what is, I mean, even the robots within Star Trek are all kind of based around the laws of robotics that Isaac Asimov established, and even how they work, how they function, is based on that. It's just it's cool, you know, because it's kind of it's not real, but it's now real. It's very real, and is very has found its way into the fabrics of our reality.
Exactly. There's a question online from Chris Collins, and he says, "Is there?" Or he asked, "Is there a particular genre you tend to like to read, and were you always into reading?"
Yes, I've always been into reading, and I've read, I guess, I mean, I've read all sorts of books, like, you know, the fantasy books and stuff like that, which is kind of I sort of like. I mean, I kind of like the whole magic stuff sometimes, but I don't know. I'm not super into that kind of stuff. But I do like the hard science fiction stuff. I like the so I actually just finished reading The Accidental Time Machine, which was really great. It was a very quick, easy read. But it was I liked it because this guy accidentally builds a time machine. He's a student at MIT, or an intern at MIT. And so I like the practicality of certain concepts, like that it could actually be real. And working in the details into the story to make it as real as possible while still having the plot be engaging and having characters that are lively and interesting. So I guess I like those kinds of things. I read a lot of science fiction. I also read a lot of nonfiction, like books about business, books about stuff like that, marketing, things, kind of biographies. I've started reading history, into history, and yeah, I guess those are the kind of. But yeah, I love to read. I'm currently reading like 12 different books. I'm just always reading, like, constantly, because it's like, you know, I read like a few pages and I'm just like, oh, I'm not feeling this right now. So then I go into another book and I just read that, you know. It's always nice to just have a constant flow of stuff that I'm reading at the same time. It's kind of like watching different shows, you know, like nobody's ever watching just one show. Like they got other shows going on at the same time. So it's kind of the same, I feel like.
I'm amazed that you could switch gears like that, and then just be able to pick something else up and know exactly where you left off.
That's what bookmarks are for.
All right, all right. So you're a wise guy too. So let's move into Star Trek for a bit. I'm going to read a question that Bob Kinney is asking, and he says, "How did you get into Star Trek?"
Hello, Bob. How did I get into it? Okay, I guess. All right, this is kind of a fun story, and hopefully, you guys won't laugh at me for this, but so I had always been aware of Star Trek, and here's the thing. So I grew up watching stuff from the 60s. That was like, those were my favorite shows growing up, was just watching like I Love Lucy, The Munsters. And so that's just what I was watching as a kid. I watched a lot of black and white television. And it's just kind of interesting that for one reason or the other, Star Trek, the original series, had never found its way into that programming that I had. And but I did. One of my best friends, her older sister, was very much into Star Trek, and I didn't really know too much about it. But whenever I was at her house, she would be watching some Star Trek stuff, and So I had seen, you know, clips and stuff like that of the animated series. And so I was very aware of kind of different characters and kind of what was going on with Star Trek and stuff, but didn't really know. I never sat down and like actually got to see it, right? Fast forward, at this point I already love science fiction. It's already a thing in my everyday life. But fast forward, I was invited to go watch this movie, which I did not know anything about. But a group of friends were going to go see it, and I was like, sure. So the movie that we ended up watching was a film called Galaxy Quest.
Ah,
And so as soon as the credits rolled, I was like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love this movie. I know every single line, every single scene from start to finish. Like every word. Love this movie, seen it 1,000 times. I was at a Comic-Con. I was at one of those conventions. Actually, I think it might have been LA, the Kamikaze, which is now called the LA Comic-Con. And I was there with a friend, and we were looking at one of the booths had like Galaxy Quest memorabilia. And to me, I was like, what? There's memorabilia because like to me, I was just, it's a comedy, like it's just you know, it's like having memorabilia for like Meet the Parents or something, right? I'm just like, why does this exist? And so I started freaking out about it, and I was like, oh my God, what? There's a Galaxy Quest thing like right here. Why is this here? And then for some reason, like we started talking about, he started talking about Star Trek. And I was like, oh yeah, like I've actually never really seen Star Trek. Not really. And my friend was like, what? Really? I would have thought that you, of all people, I thought you were a fan. Like I had no idea. This guy has like a Star Trek wallet, right? So I'm just like, he's completely oblivious to this. And he's like, well, you know, Galaxy Quest is basically like a Star Trek movie. And I was like, what? And in that conversation sparked that in me, where I realized that I was so ingrained in this universe of science fiction, and I hadn't seen one of the most influential franchises of multiple generations. And that is, to me, what really inspired me to dive into it, because I genuinely did it for the culture. I was like, this is unacceptable. It's kind of like just being a filmmaker and not having seen The Godfather. You know, it's just like one of those things where you don't want to be one of those people. Fun fact, I was one of those people. It took me very long. It was like a few years into my career as a filmmaker that I actually had seen The Godfather. It took me that long to get into it. But I decided when I started to do the research, I wanted to do it right. And so I wanted to watch everything from chronological order, which is how I've landed where I am today. So I actually started watching Star Trek officially in December of 2017, was when I watched the very first pilot episode of the original series, which was very difficult to get through. Then when I watched the actual first episode of the original series, I was hooked. From that moment on, I was like, this is everything that I never expected. And I've been watching Star Trek every single day since then. And so I actually have a spreadsheet. So I made a spreadsheet of this because there's so much content. There's so much content that you have to watch. And so I'm actually watching everything as it was released, including the films. So in between seasons, I'm watching if a movie came out, I'm watching that in between the series. So yeah, I'm watching it all in order.
Yeah, I have to say, because you shared that spreadsheet with me, and for those of you who might not believe it, it starts out from the very first episode of Star Trek. And there's even a plan to watch Picard season 2. So, so you are really, I'm going to jump back to Galaxy Quest for a second.
Mm.
Okay, because Galaxy Quest is the best Star Trek movie ever made. Best Star Trek movie ever made.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's when I watched it, it was so hilarious to me. But it's also, when people ask me what is my definition of a perfect film, I always say Galaxy Quest. And it's because I feel like Galaxy Quest is so perfectly written. The dialogue is very crisp and it's so sharp, and smart, and just very engaging. And then for a comedy, it just has it hits all of these marks that I want it to hit. Um, of course, like the acting is just great. I mean, it's everybody is just so good at being those characters. Um, and just from start to finish, I feel like it's entertaining, and the fact that I could enjoy it without really being aware of what it was actually parodying is really a testament of how good of a film it is, a standalone film it is. And even if you aren't kind of into this geek or nerd, Comic Con thing, it's still an entertaining movie to watch, because it's really just about a bunch of washed up actors, trying to relive their glory days, right? And that's just funny in itself. You don't have to be a part of like this fan base to really enjoy it.
yeah, absolutely. So have you ever seen Never Surrender?
Yeah, the documentary.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I was a little bit disappointed about it, just because I wanted it to be a little bit more detailed, but it was still fun. It was a fun thing to watch, and um I feel like they left some stuff out. Like, it just seemed like they left some stuff out. But it was still entertaining, I thought.
I thought there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that made the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know. You always wonder how a movie ends up being the movie that it is. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that a lot of what they talked about on how they either got a character or the dialogue or something, even the fact that they originally uh, were looking at doing like a Star Trek type bridge,
Right.
or that, and what is it? NTE is
Mm-hmm.
their registry,
Yeah.
and it stands for Not the Enterprise.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think all that's great, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. So now I'm going to give you a line that I use all the time. I think it's very appropriate for a person who does what I do for a regular job. And the line is, I have one job. It's stupid, but I'm going to do it. And I say that to people all the time, and they look at me like I'm crazy
Do you
because
slam your fist on the table every time you say
I haven't, but I might,
it?
now that you say it, it might carry a little more weight.
Yeah, you have to just
Exactly.
channel Sigourney. Just
Exactly. Exactly. Um, so with all of the content, and I up until just now, when you said you started watching Star Trek in 2017,
mm,
and you were at the studio in 2018, so you were a newbie, so to
mm-hmm.
speak. But the fact that thought enough to say, hey, this place might be cool and come on out and show people that it was cool is rather fascinating.
Yeah, I mean it. I really mean it when I say that as soon as I watched the the first episode after the pilot, I was hooked. It was it was something that I couldn't really explain, but it just kind of felt like home. It felt right, and it felt like a lot of the things that I had missed or that I felt were missing from things that I had been consuming were filled. Those gaps were filled.
Very cool. Very cool. So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that because the studios were also only like 3 hours away, and I saw that the open house was it was just so it was perfect for me, and the idea of going and seeing and being inside of it was really cool. I mean, it's like imagine it's kind of like when kids go to Disneyland, you know, and they see like their favorite characters are coming, you know, like these people are dressed up as their favorite characters and they hug them and they ask them if they're had like, you know, what ride they just got off of, and it's like suddenly like this, you know, Cinderella's like real, you know, and she's like looking at you and hugging you and like touching your hair, and it's like this is it's so being able to be on the set and just kind of walk around and sit in the captain's chair and do cool stuff like that is I was very enthusiastic about it.
Oh, it was great. It was great. Um, so again, with all that the content that's now 54 years old, right, from the original series all the way through the series, I guess Enterprise would be the last of the regular series, the movies, and now
Mhm.
Discovery and Picard, and talk of new series coming out, Strange New Worlds.
Mhm.
They never did do anything with Section 31, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure what's
Yeah.
going on with that.
Mhm.
But I want to say, how would you rate them, or what's your, what's your favorite? I'm not going to ask you what the least favorite is, but
But do you want to know what my least favorite?
well, I would like to know what your least favorite is.
Um, I'm not completely done with Enterprise yet, but I have to say it's probably the most difficult one to get into. But I will say that Deep Space Nine was also very difficult for me to get into. It was a very different change. It was a change in pace and setting, and the goals for the characters was very different than what I had been used to. Because, like, realize I'm also watching this in kind of like it's I'm going by real fast in comparison to how it was actually coming out, right? So it's like instead of 10 years, it only
Yeah,
took me 2 years to go from from Captain Kirk to Cisco. It's just like it's kind of it's a lot to take in. But what fascinates me about the original series, like the first few series, is the element of exploration and having to deal with what you encounter. Because I guess it kind of brings in that element of unpredictability to it, that even though in Deep Space Nine they were a station where they did have a lot of unpredictable stuff happening because you never know who's going to show up to the station or come through the wormhole or whatever. It's like there's a little bit of that, but it's just not the same as there's still too much of a controlled environment, I feel like. But as far as like I mean, I really liked it's really difficult to say because I loved Voyager. It was it felt like just fresh air. Because I was watching Deep Space Nine, and suddenly like after the first couple episodes, I was hooked again. Like I had that same feeling that I had the first time that I watched the original series. So suddenly I found myself with these characters who had been thrown across the galaxy and are now 70 light years away from planet Earth. And there's this need of like, well, they're so far away from home. Are they going to be able to keep up with the Prime Directive? Should they? Do they need to? I mean, why? They're so far away from Starfleet. Who's going to know, right? Like it could go rogue like at any second. And the fact that it doesn't is it makes for good entertainment. And so I feel like Voyager was definitely one of the most entertaining ones. Some of the characters were very annoying, but luckily they didn't have a lot of limelight. And I love The Next Generation. Patrick Stewart is he is the definition of what I want a captain to be. See, I don't have anything cool. Like, I mean, I have a communicator. That's all I've got.
That's okay.
I have a communicator.
Well, mine talks.
And my dress. You know, I have been thinking I should probably get like a little spaceship or something like that. I haven't decided what I want yet, but I definitely want something that's kind of cool. I have a communicator because my friend got me one as a gift. It's from the original series. It does like, it's like a very cheap one that just makes little boop sounds and all that stuff. And then I have the dress, which I wore in the video.
Yes.
At the studio. And yeah, I have actually been asked who's my favorite captain. And I have to say that it is between Picard and Janeway so far. I have to say those are probably my favorite ones.
Well, I'm on the same page as you in a lot of what you're saying. How far into Enterprise are you?
I'm still in season 1, so
Okay.
I'm not very far.
Season 1 was tough. Season 1, they were really trying to find their way.
Yeah.
Season 2 gets better. Season
heard.
3 is the season.
Okay.
Season 3, and then into season 4. And unfortunately, I think they succumbed to some pressure and they ended after 4 seasons. But I think they could have gone further.
Yeah, that's when the Space Marines showed up, and unfortunately, I think it lost its way entirely. They wanted more action.
You know, I got the same kind of reaction when I told people how I felt about Deep Space Nine, and they said kind of the same thing where they were just like, yeah, you know, the first 2 seasons is kind of hard to get into. It's like after the 3rd one, it kind of picks up, which I felt that like as soon as they introduced the war with the Dominion, like suddenly we found ourselves with these shapeshifters who could just be anywhere. But then the first few episodes right after that, like right after they introduced that concept, they felt like filler episodes. And I was like, wait a second, we're in the middle of a war here with shapeshifters, and you're gonna make an episode about Jake like being a writer, like, and his dad dying. Like, it was just like all of this stuff where I'm just like, why is this happening right now? It's very distracting and taking it away from what I want to be focused on, you know? But still, I feel like even within that, it's so much fun to watch anyway, even with like the filler episodes. I mean, there's some pretty bad episodes, but I feel like the good episodes kind of balance it all out.
Yeah. I'm gonna. So here's my take on DS9, and I'm sure it's gonna get me in trouble with some people, but
Uh-oh.
I really tried. First of all, I really tried to get into it. Even much later on, I went back to revisit it. My problem was there would be like two or three really great episodes in a row, and then there was an episode about Quark. I didn't care about Quark. And so I try it again, good episode, and Quark again. So it always kind of bothered me, but the tone of it changed
Hmm.
when they got into that whole, and it's the wrong word for what it was, but that whole religious
Mm-hmm.
atmosphere
Right.
with whoever they were, and trying to find, the key to life or something.
Right.
And I just wasn't wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. It was Star Trek, and it was clearly Star Trek, but it just wasn't my cup of tea,
Yeah.
you know. But
Yeah. I'm and I like the animated series as well. I mean, after I was watching I had finished watching the original series and going into the animated series, which surprisingly a lot of fans that I've talked to haven't seen much of for whatever reason. I mean, yeah, the animation is not, you're not really watching it for the animation, but but you got to see the writers express themselves a little bit freer because they suddenly didn't have the holdup of the technology and the special effects that were available at the time.
right,
And they suddenly could make weird aliens and have all these weird things happening that they wouldn't have had normally.
Okay, here's controversy. You talk about animation. Martin Bend has a question. What are your thoughts about Lower Decks?
Okay, so so Lower Decks is not supposed. So I am trying to watch everything in order, but I did watch an episode of Lower Decks. I broke order. But so I did watch an episode of Lower Decks because I was very curious about it. Because it seems to be so very different from what Star Trek is all about. um, it it was kind of entertaining, and again, I'm only basing this off of the first episode that I saw, and it was entertaining, but it was um, a little bit hard to get into because they don't, in the first episode they don't go into the whole philosophical side of things, which is very Star Trek. um, so the fact that there wasn't really any kind of moral dilemma or something for the crew to really kind of work out in that regard was a little bit like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is different. um, and and I'm not such a like huge fan of that animation style either. um, so yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see when I get there. When I get to that point on the spreadsheet, it's gonna be a few months, I think.
so it's
get
okay.
get back to me and get back to me next year.
I agree on your evaluation of the episode you saw. I saw the first episode, and I had a very similar reaction. So
I
I
didn't
get it.
hate it.
No, I didn't
It
hate it.
was just I have to watch a couple more to really give an actual opinion. But I did see that Bob in the chat said that the original series was animated similar to 60s and earlier 70s cartoons, which, yeah, so my favorite movie of all time is Planet of the Apes, and Planet of the Apes actually has an animated series as well, which not a lot of people are familiar with because it completely flopped. But the animated series looks almost identical to the Star Trek animated series as far as what they look like, because it was just the style of the time. very emotionless, emotionless faces. But I still like the way that it looks. The color palettes and stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the production company back then might have even been, if Planet of the Apes looked similar, I believe it was Filmation.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Used to do all of those, correct? Thanks, Dan.
Correct.
The reason I didn't care for the animated series, and I never watch it, I never go back, I have no interest in watching it again. It's for a completely different reason. And, I'm a person who, unfortunately, was there in September of 1966 and got hooked like you did on the first real episode of Star Trek, because we never saw the cage. We only saw, you know, um, the first episode. And when the animated series came out, fans at the time, uh, luckily most of them are probably dead by now, but fans fans at the time said that meant that was the end of Star Trek. We'd never see any real Star Trek again. And that's when you've got nothing else to go by. I mean, you there was no VCR, no DVD.
Right.
If you watched it, if you saw it, you saw it, and if you missed it, too bad. You know.
Yeah. And I think too, there's, even though I knew that, like, as I was watching episodes, if I wasn't really enjoying it, I knew that there was more. And I knew that there would be more, and the chances of me not liking those as well was going to be very low. So that keeps me going. And that's why I haven't stopped yet, But I can see how that would be very jarring to kind of go from a very charismatic William Shatner to just whatever that was in the animated series. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, and I think the tone of Star Trek, I know we're really getting into the nitty gritty of things here, which is great. I think the tone of Star Trek changed
Yeah.
after the passing of Gene. I think when Gene passed and it was left to, other writers and other producers, I think they lost track of what that original vision was.
What the goal was, yeah.
What the goal was. And it was interesting you said, your comments about Picard. I remember seeing the very first episode. I think it was Caretaker was the name of the episode, the premiere. And I was waiting for it for so long. I said, God, new Star Trek, great. And I watched that first episode and I said, this is awful. This is terrible. This is going nowhere. And it took me a while because it wasn't my Star Trek.
Right.
It wasn't my Star Trek.
Yeah.
But I have always thought, interestingly enough, because it was Gene who did The Cage, it was Gene who did the original series, and it was Gene who at least created Next Generation. And I always thought Picard and Pike were two of a kind. That was my observation. I think he probably had that character on the back shelf because, NBC didn't want it, and he decided to reincarnate it.
Yeah.
And he did a great job. He did a great job on it.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the Next Generation wasn't your Star Trek. And I felt that same thing when I started Deep Space Nine, because I had just finished watching The Next Generation, and I was so invested, and I had just fallen in love with so many of the characters and the imperfections of the show. And to just completely just flip it and just change, and the characters too, right? And the setting, like everything was just gone. And so it's just kind of like, oh, because so after, even though I had gone through that with the Next Generation, like, you know, I went from the original cast to the Next Generation cast, I had expected that, right? Because I had already been in that mindset of, oh, I'm watching all of them and I know that there's a bunch of different cast members. But because the original series doesn't last for as many years as the Next Generation does, I had much more time to get invested with the characters on the Next Generation and with that setting. So kind of ripping that Band-Aid of like, oh man, okay, all right, well now I have to keep going because, like, you know, I made a spreadsheet. So
I got to follow the spreadsheet.
yeah, I can't go back. There's no,
I have one job. It's stupid, but I'm
I'm
going to
gonna do it.
Do you know the just an interesting item about Patrick Stewart was that he had no confidence that the Next Generation was going to succeed. And for the first season, he never unpacked. He always kept his clothes in a whatever, you know, a
Yeah.
suitcase.
Yeah.
Because he was afraid that they were just going to cancel it and he was ready to go. So it's funny how things turn out because look at where he is now. I mean, he's doing it today. All that he's done,
Right.
and he's done Picard. Have you seen Picard? I don't know if you've gotten it.
No, I haven't because I want to keep watching. I want to get through everything and not kind of break through. It was very tempting. I almost did it. The only reason that I did Lower Decks is because it was they posted the entire thing on their YouTube channel one day. I don't even think it's there anymore. It was like a thing that they had just did as a promotional thing. And so I was like, okay, it's there. I'm going to watch it. I couldn't hold it in. I was like, oh man, I need to see this thing because I was so curious to know what they were going to do with that because it just seems so different. But yeah, I see Christopher asked a question in the chat. What is your favorite episode of the original series or Star Trek Continues? I'm going to say, all right, so I love Data. And I love the episode where he builds his
Wow.
Yeah. And so I love that episode. I also love The City on the Edge of Forever. That one's a great one as well. There's a lot of really great episodes for the original series, but these are just some of my favorite episodes overall. And I guess I mean there was a lot of good ones that I liked for Voyager as well. I mean, I like a lot of the ones after 7 of 9 is introduced, because I like seeing her character kind of develop, her human properties.
Yeah, there are gems. I'll be honest with you. Every series has a gem.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite, because there are a lot of good episodes of Voyager. The one with and I can't think of the character's name, but the time traveler. They find him in the past and they find him in the future, and he's kind of a recurring character. Or Year of Hell is another one that's great.
Right.
But,
Year of Hell's great.
My favorite episode on Voyager is the one where, and of course I'm blank on character names now, but the science officer. Can't think of his name, and that's bothers. Tuvok. He's having sort of a brain issue, and they're trying to help him, and he ends up landing on his assignment on Sulu's ship,
Hmm.
and uh, I think it was Star Trek 6.
Right.
And what I loved about that was, even though he wasn't a Vulcan
Hmm.
in that movie, he was a part of the crew.
Right.
So it was very cool. So every one of them has its merits.
Yeah, I really loved. I did like a lot of the kind of the spatial anomalies that were introduced in Deep Space Nine. So I kind of like a lot of they had a lot of cool concepts. Um, so there was actually one where Jadzia, who's probably my favorite character out of the whole series, Jadzia Dax was probably my favorite character out of Deep Space Nine. She falls in love with this um, alien species that's like they're kind of living as consciousnesses, like they just kind of float around, and that's like their whole thing. And like but when they kind of like blink out of existence, and they're like living in kind of this other place, and they don't come back until where like it takes a long time for them to actually show up again. And so she like falls in love, and they go through like this whole thing of her joining them, and it's kind of like those kinds of episodes where they really are imaginative with the possibilities of what you might be able to find in space exploration and encountering new species. Those are the kind of episodes that really fascinate me.
Yeah, I understand. One of the things, my uh, observation about all of the series, and why I always go back to the original series, is the music.
Mm-hmm.
Forgetting the dialogue, forgetting the characters, forgetting the stories, because some of the stories are outstanding in the original series. But the music just emoted exactly what you knew the characters were going through, and it always just kept you, entertained, or enthralled with what was going to happen next. You knew when
Right.
it was a good scene, you knew when it was a bad scene, you knew when they were in trouble. I don't feel that you get the same thing from the other series,
Mm-hmm.
even TNG,
Right.
because the music style was so different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned the music, because the theme songs are all very epic and memorable, but I was not a fan. I was not a fan of the Deep Space Nine theme song when it first happened, when the first few episodes that I watched. But then afterwards, I hummed it every single time the credits rolled. I was like, oh, okay, it's time to do the theme song now. Um, I'm having a hard time. I feel like I have the luxury of being able to skip through the intro song for Enterprise every time it comes on.
I don't blame you.
um, Part of me feels bad because I feel like I'm cheating. Like I should be like just sitting through it. But yeah, it was very the first time that I heard it, I I was like, what is this? What is this song? This is a theme song. What is this? It's very Full House. It's very
Yes, it's very Full House.
It's
That's a
been a
good.
long
That's
time.
great.
it's been a long time, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been a
That's
long
why
time.
what, third
If
season,
you could,
second season, they speeded it up,
Oh no. Yeah.
yeah, if you
which
can,
was horrible.
if you can stay with it, if you can stay with Enterprise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's a wonderfully written, wonderfully acted two-part episode. It's called In a Mirror Darkly. Try to stay with it until that comes on.
Mm.
And essentially, it takes place. I'm not going to give you the whole story, obviously, but it takes place in mirror universe, right?
Mhm.
But the Defiant from the original series, when it winked out,
Mhm.
actually went back in time into the mirror universe, and they find that ship, and they pull a they there are no stops.
Yeah.
They pull out everything, and it's really, to me, that's probably the best episode that they've got. But the reason I thought of it was because they came up with a completely different theme song for those two episodes,
Mm.
which was more like Nazi Germany type theme
Mm.
song. It was very interesting. So try to stay with it.
Speaking of time travel, what did you guys think about the ending for Voyager and them getting home?
Well, it's it's interesting because you think they would have left it open ended, right?
Right.
You think it would have left it open ended.
Hmm.
Um, and there were episodes where they were in communication with the Alpha Quadrant.
Right.
So, you knew they were going to try to get home, but it would have been nice for them to just kind of be out there and allow for something, some other story. I don't know. You brought it up for a reason. What's your take on
No, I was just curious to know what you guys think.
Cop out.
You got it,
It
Dan.
it was a nicely tied little bow, um, which is fine. It was entertaining. It was just kind of like a little, we're done now.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And um, it it's definitely one that I'm gonna have to rewatch a couple times to kind of really grasp it, because it's kind of I mean, it was entertaining, but at the same time just didn't really. I I'm I'm a fan of cliffhangers. I like the idea of letting me interpret what's happening, even though it drives me nuts. Um, but it makes it entertaining to kind of let the audience have their own imagination of what's happening.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's perfect sense. You're gonna hate the last episode of Enterprise because I do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it
you're
anyway.
supposed to sell me. You're supposed to help me through this.
It's great, except for the last episode. What can I say? They really, when you talk about putting a bow on it, they just put a nail in a coffin, is what they did with the last episode of Enterprise. But that shouldn't stop you from watching it. And by the way, my other comment is that being a Next Generation fan, right? And I know it got a lot of Star Trek fans don't like any of the new all access stuff,
Mhm.
but I absolutely 100% loved Picard. I loved it. I loved it from the opening scene to the closing scene in the last episode. I thought it was so well done. So well done.
Um, I don't know if you guys want me to share the spreadsheet.
If you like, I can if you like, because I did download it.
I don't. Do I have
Unless
to
you want to do it. Let me see if I can
here?
put control over to you. Let's see if I can. I'm not sure how to do that because, I'm not that smart.
I don't really know how to do that either.
I don't know how to do that. I'll bring it up and you can
All
tell me
right.
where you want me to go. Okay.
Yeah, I just think if people want to see what it is, because we keep
Yeah.
referencing the spreadsheet, might be good just to show them. I mean, you can also link it in the chat if you
Nope. I've got it
guys want
here.
me to.
I've got it here. And it should be, is it up now?
I see your screen. Yeah, gotta
Okay. So I got to move this up.
pull it
How's
up.
that? Let's see. Let's get this going. How's
So,
that?
Romina, I have just a second here. Have you seen anything of Discovery?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm not there on
Okay.
the spreadsheet.
I thought maybe it might have cropped up as you were walking through a room someplace.
I've seen a couple of clips and read some articles. No spoilers, though. I mean, not huge like plot spoilers. So just kind of stuff that's here and there, and the opinions of my friends.
Because like Ray, I was there for the beginning. I was a 10-year-old when Star Trek started. So I think Ray and I have some logical point to think back about what was great and maybe what wasn't. And I'll tell you, Discovery gets its legs second season. And right now, it's pretty interesting in the third season. But of course, I love The Expanse. And
Right.
I can't wait to see our favorite bounty hunter from Star Wars every week.
So here's your spreadsheet. The thing that this is where I think people have too much time. And you are a person who should not have this much time.
I don't have the time. I make the time. I choose to not do important things and do this instead.
Okay, that makes perfect logical sense. The first 3 lines are how much time. I mean, there's 596 hours of Star Trek, and you've seen 492 of them. Can't leave out the 19 minutes. And there's 103 hours left to go, and then you chart out every season of every series with all of this information, and it's baffling to think that so much content for this series is out there.
I linked the spreadsheet in the chat in case people want to see it, because I think it's a little bit blurry from the live stream.
Actually, I might be able to do this.
And it should be public for you guys, but
how's that?
The first line just says the total time that it takes to watch the entire franchise, and that's 24 days, 20 hours, and 1 minute, approximately, guys. And then it also has my current progress, which is I'm 20 days, 12 hours, and 19 minutes. That's how much content I've watched. So these are 20 days, 24-hour days of content. And 12 hours and 19 minutes. And then how much time I have left is about 4 days. So this is kind of like an approximation because, of course, some episodes are longer than others, and there's all of this stuff going on, you know, little variables, but it's only really off by like maybe a couple minutes. It's not really that off.
Well, I'm not going to hold you to it, that's for sure.
Yeah, so then I mark off what I've watched. So I mark off what I've watched and what I have yet to see. You can kind of see what I've been through.
See, what I find interesting too, which it actually puts a couple of things in perspective, going back to the top, but it's interesting how movies were released in between a particular series. And I don't know that I ever really put that together before. So, Generations came out during, in between season 3 of Deep Space Nine and the premiere of Voyager. So it's kind of interesting to put all of that in perspective.
Yeah, and it's also fun to just kind of see things as they came out, especially the movies, because some of them happen while the shows that are on TV have different cast members, and it's it's kind of like just seeing them holding on to these characters. Just for lack of a better example, Star Trek Insurrection, which was like they really jumped the shark on that one, but
Yes, they really did. Not to be confused with Star Trek Indigestion.
well, easy to get those two confused.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you guys know why people say jump the shark?
Yes, I do. I'm not going to say it, but I do. I don't know if Larry or Dan does, or
Hey.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I never saw that episode. By then, I'd already decided it had jumped the shark.
It's pretty horrible.
It was horrible. Almost all of that. I hate to say it was horrible. We won't mention it so we don't offend fans, but that was really a low point in sitcoms in my younger days. I had better things to do than watch that show.
just believe it or not, earlier today on YouTube, I came across, because I watch YouTube. I came across an interview several years ago at Golden Globes or something of Fonzie. What's his name? Whomever played Fonzie.
Henry Winkler.
Henry Winkler, right? They did an interview with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the interviewer said that she understood that he had one of his leather jackets, or one of his leather jackets was in the Smithsonian. And he went into this short story about how there were actually 5 jackets. And he's talking about where all of the jackets, what happened to all of the 5 jackets. He has one, Gary Marshall took one, and he said, one of them, we ripped the lining out and I jumped the shark with that one.
Wow. Wow.
That's about all I can say. Wow.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
mean, it was one of the shows that I watched as a kid, and I liked Happy Days. I guess I like the theme song. I mean, that's probably like the best thing. But yeah, there's just so much content for Star Trek that it really helps me just to have the spreadsheet to kind of keep track of stuff, and it is also it's kind of like a little plaque of honor, because once I'm kind of caught up with everything, then it's like a little certificate that says, hey, I made it.
Yeah. Trouble is you don't know when it's going to end.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just in like the past 6 months alone, I added how many rows? I guess I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 rows.
5 rows.
Yeah.
They got to slow down, because if I'm adding 5 or 6 rows every year, that's gonna I'm never gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, the good news is you'll be able to get through short treks pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There are a couple of very, very well done short treks. So that's something to honestly look forward to.
The scary thing is that's 50 plus years of my life all put in a spreadsheet. Yes, there's large black holes in the middle where other things happened, but and now we have, in the next year or two, we're going to have so much content from Star Trek to watch. You may run out of time, actually, Romina.
Never. I will make it my job.
I get it.
Yeah, Bob Kinney says she has to be part Vulcan. Okay, maybe that's the secret.
Maybe so.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I don't know if I could handle being Vulcan. I think I'm too charming.
You'd
Well,
be
what character would you like to play if we could ever get you to do something at the Neutral Zone Studios in Kingsland?
I do like Vulcans. But only because, you know, you get to wear the ears. But if we're I like the idea of science officers, and I'm not sure if I'm really captain material. I mean, well, maybe. I feel like I'd have to work up to it. But hopefully I'm not like Harry and I'm just like an ensign for 6 years, 7 years, because that's
Poor
kind of
Harry Kim, yes.
right. It's just, I mean, they didn't even have any other choice, right? There was no competition. Like, it's not like there were other ensigns that were better than him. There's it's just his luck that he just got stuck being an ensign for 7 years. But I like the idea of like working up to the captain's chair. But I definitely think I might be too expressive to be Vulcan, even though a part of me wishes that I could be, because Spock was probably, I would say Spock was my favorite character in the original series.
Well, you know, the first 3 letters of your name could give you a character that looks like a Vulcan but isn't.
True.
You could be a Romulan.
True. I could be a Romulan. I could probably pull that off. A little tough, a little witty. I could do that.
There you go, Ray.
There we go. It's very hard sometimes. It's just very, very hard.
It happens. Life is hard.
Life is hard. If life was easy,
hard, you know?
we'd all do it. We'd all
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If life was easy, we wouldn't have Star Trek Insurrection, but we do. So
There's a quote. That's got to go up at the studio. There's a quote. So tell everybody where they can find you. Do you have for a Patreon page? Where can people look for you?
yeah, well, I guess the easiest way is just my website, which is redromina.com. I've also commented a little bit on the Facebook Live. So my Facebook page is there too. I'm pretty easy to find just because I'm Red Romina everywhere. I mostly hang out on Twitter. I also have an Instagram. And like I said at the start, my email is also open as well. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about? Really?
I don't know, unless you've got more questions for me.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I learned a lot about you in these last couple of hours. Really?
You got your fill of Red Romina.
No, I would never say that because I never would think that. You are a fascinating person.
Thank you.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of depth to certain people.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that.
you said, actually, there is a question I
Mm.
want to ask you. There is a question I want to ask you.
Mm.
So, with all your, and this is, I'm going to tell everyone that it's the question that I haven't asked any other guest on this show, but the question is, with all of your interest and how much you love Star Trek, what does Star Trek mean to you?
Possibilities. It's the opportunity and the freedom to explore and imagine and to collaborate. And the possibility that we can do all of these things in a sort of harmonious manner, and that we can carry through the hardships, even the most difficult things that the crew is presented with in each of the series and in films, they manage to carry through these hardships with grace, and that's something that I'm attracted to, and then I feel like that's what Star Trek means to me. Is as soon as I started getting involved and engaged in the Star Trek universe, it really put into perspective how I carried myself in a day-to-day basis. And I've implemented some of the things that I've learned from watching it in my own life. And I think, you know, I've said multiple times during the show when we were talking about travel and stuff, I mean, I've talked about life-changing experiences, but Star Trek is definitely something that has changed my life because it has changed me. So that's what Star Trek means to me.
Well said. Well said. I have one last question. Chris Collins wrote in, and actually, he read my mind because I was going to bring this episode up. But do you see his question?
What
His
was it?
question is, yeah, what was it like for you watching TNG Best of Both Worlds because you didn't have to wait all summer to see part 2?
I think I'm also very lucky that I have gotten to see the 2-parters without having to wait. Voyager did that as well, and I'm very lucky. I feel very lucky that I don't have to wait, and then I can kind of have days where I just watch 3 or 4 episodes when I'm hooked, and it's like that one moment when you're deciding, well, I've already spent an hour watching this. What's another hour more? It's just one click. Just like I just have to move the cursor a couple centimeters and we're there. And 3 or 4 hours later and I'm still there.
I get it. It's been binge watching to the nth degree.
Yeah, and then
That's what it
Netflix
is.
asks me if I would like to continue watching, and then I get offended. But it makes it a little bit easier to to consume, not having to wait for the 2-parters, for the second half of 2-parters. But it's kind of, you know, I did have to go through that where I was watching shows where I had to wait until the next week and wait until the next season. So I've lived through that as well. So I'm very grateful for stuff like Netflix and Hulu and all of those platforms where I can just hit the next button and waste an entire day.
I get it. It sounds like too, just like your reading skills, that you might turn on an episode of DS9 and say, yes, I'm not feeling it today. Let me put on Voyager.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what it is, isn't it? It's just kind of, there's so many different things to watch at any given moment. I still haven't quite figured out how to control that kind of thing, because I'm very much interested in knowledge and consuming knowledge, and just having it at my fingertips is very overwhelming, and it is something difficult. It is a challenge to deal with on a daily basis almost, to be able to just kind of accept that I won't learn and that I won't consume everything that I want to consume. And it's just kind of learning how to deal with that.
I get it. I get it. Well, you are, I was going to say, a fascinating person, but I think you're a remarkable
Thank you.
person because you really you know, you're a person who seems to, you know, have it together, at least as we talk in this conversation. Um, you never lose, you know, you never lose sight of the goals,
Mm,
right? Um, and you're not afraid to take risks.
yeah,
You know, there's a lot of people that are afraid to take risks. So
right.
it's really, I've enjoyed this considerably
Thank
this
you.
evening, and I really thank you for being with us.
Yeah,
And
thank you guys for having me too, because I mean, it's not every day that I get to talk about what I am doing in so much detail. I mean, when people find out, I get people asking me constantly what my progress is in my journey on watching Star Trek. I mean, it happens randomly. Almost every week, I get someone asking me, you know, how's the Star Trek thing going? But I hardly ever get to really do a deep dive into it and the universe and what it actually means. Um, and it's nice to be able to talk about it, because when people ask me, it's like, yeah, I talk about it, and then that's kind of it. It's like, oh, okay, well, what are you doing next week? You know, it just kind of goes off into that. So it's nice. Thank you for having me and inviting me, and letting me talk openly and freely.
that's this is just meant to be, you know, fun and informative. And I think tonight accomplished both of those uh, completely. So I really do thank you for being with us. And we'll be talking in the future. I'm going to be on your members only club pretty soon, I think, because that in itself sounds fascinating. But you know what? You can never meet too many people.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. Um, and that's good. And again, you know, please visit Romina's page, redromina.com. It's got a lot of content there, and I think it's a lot of stuff that you would really enjoy and appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna play my end credits because that's what I do. There you go. All right, let's play our.